Well, hey, Shaun, how are you doing today?
I'm doing it. My answer is kind of split. I'm doing well and I'm very angry.
Well, I want to welcome you to the grid today, and I can understand why you're angry. And that is going to be the topic for our discussion today, is the source of that anger. Shaun, what are we talking about today?
Today we are talking about the sham trial of Donald J. Trump.
The Shamviction. That is going to be the word that I think I use to go along with your shamdemic. Yeah. Audience, if you don't know by now that Donald Trump was unanimously convicted by a jury in New York on 34 counts of falsifying business records in order to influence an election, then I would question your connection to society in general. In fact, I would say you're about as off grid as you can get. And if you are, you're not listening to this podcast anyway. So, yes, of course, you've heard about it. Shaun, what was your initial reaction when you learned about the conviction?
I had to switch over to that aspect of the gift of the spirit called no, the fruit of the spirit called self-control because I was furniture throwing mad.
So it's interesting that you say that. That was a lot of people's reaction. Do you know what my reaction was?
I'm
Complete.
about to.
Yes, you are. Complete ambivalence. I was like, yeah, whatever. And it was interesting because I heard various commentators say that there's probably a 70 to really, I actually think about 80% chance that'll be a hung jury, about a 15% chance that Trump would actually be convicted, or maybe it's 15% that'd be acquitted, and then about a 5% chance he would be actually convicted. But somehow I knew this is New York. This is Alvin Bragg. This is a Soros DA. When you think about, and we're going to cover a few of the aspects here in a minute, when you think about how the trial which didn't really shape out, I mean, how it was shaped. I'm saying that to introduce intentionality. How the trial was shaped, controlled, and structured. I was kind of like, yeah, I'm not surprised he was convicted. I'm kind of surprised that it was on all 34 counts, but it doesn't matter because it's going to be overturned. The only thing this gives is really talking points for the Democrats to say, hey, the Republicans have nominated convicted felon. Even when it's overturned, they'll still say that. Are we agreed on that, Shaun?
Oh yeah, convicted felon is the key phrase, and they've loaded their machine guns and they're spitting it out like a machine gun.
So, Shaun, I'm going to cover a couple aspects of this. I don't want to dive into too many details, but people really need to understand what this trial was about. We know what it was about politically, so I don't even know if I need to cover that. It was all political. But what was the actual meat, or in this case, the milk? what was the substance of this trial? And this is really where Alvin Bragg came from. He said, we're going to go after Trump for falsifying business records. Why? Because in 2000, I don't know, whatever, 2015, 2016, Michael Cohen, Trump's former personal attorney, paid off Stormy Daniels so her story wouldn't be made public. They call it an acquire and kill strategy. Pretty much all famous people do it because often they're hit with a story that they know is not true, but they're like, I don't want to deal with this in the public eye because it's one of those things that's hard to refute. So it sucks, but they'll sign a non-disclosure agreement, an NDA, they'll pay off that individual some amount of money. And then that person could get in a lot of trouble if they try to bring it to light once they've signed this non-disclosure agreement. Money changes hands, the story is over. So that's kind of what happened here. Trump has maintained his innocence in fact, he's never wavered from that he did not have this encounter with Stormy Daniels, as she has claimed, but it was 2015, 2016. And he said that he went ahead and told his attorneys, just deal with it. So this is what Alvin Bragg went to trial with Trump about. He said, because on the financials, it was labeled as legal expense, Trump falsified the business records. Now, Shaun, does that sound like if you're paying your attorney who took care of an issue, does it sound like it's a legal expense?
That's how I would mark it. And most people in a position like Trump, if they're anywhere close to a payment, they're going to ask the accountant how to code it. I know when I had to do um, various things for different projects or things like that, for the company I worked for, I had to find out what code to use to put on the expense report. It's it's very categorized. There's very little wiggle room to be able to go from this to that. So an attorney is your lawyer. And of course, what he does, he handles your legal stuff. Duh.
That is correct. And I will tell you, so I was a former CFO of several different hospitals. So I understand the general ledger. I understand the coding process. It's called, when you choose a code, you don't just choose whatever that code is, in this case, legal expense. You have what's called a chart of accounts. So you have preset codes on your financial statements that tell you you have legal expense, supply expense, utilities, rent, salary, wages. You have basic categories that are built in your chart of accounts. No, I have never been part of any company that ever had a chart of accounts GL code called hush money. Those don't exist. But that's what Alvin Bragg is saying, that it should have been coded as hush money. But instead, the invoice came from Michael Cohen, his personal attorney, and the payment was made to reimburse him. And so I got coded as a legal expense. Perfectly appropriate. So number one, I would say that Alvin Bragg was absolutely wrong that this was improperly coded as a legal expense. It was a legal expense. Sometimes you're paying a legal expense because you have a retainer for your attorney and you just have them on call. Sometimes you're asking them to give you a legal opinion out of a particular case. Sometimes they may be making deals on your behalf and you're reimbursing them. Sometimes you're reimbursing their cost if they go to trial. All of that is legal expense. So first of all, Alvin Bragg is dead wrong. Unless he has an accounting degree that I'm unaware of, I can assure you I know a whole lot more about this than he does. He's flat wrong. Point number one. Point number two is, how in the world did Trump get indicted on 34 counts, 34 felony accounts, when the falsification of business records in the state of New York is a misdemeanor? I will tell you how. Because in the state of New York, that falsifying business records is a misdemeanor unless it's tied to the furtherance of another crime. And so a good way to say that is, I falsified my business records in order to perpetuate something else. So maybe an example would be, because they've gone after Trump on this too, I falsified my assets in order to get a loan that I could otherwise not get for my business or for my home or whatever. So in essence, I falsified mortgage statements, which also is a crime. But if I falsified my business records in order to get that mortgage, I've falsified the business records in lieu of participating in another crime. So then it gets upgraded to felony. So that's what happened in this case. However, and this is really, really key, Alvin Bragg said that Trump did this to influence the federal election. And in doing that, that created it or took it from a misdemeanor to a felony. Now, why is that important? Because there's all this buzz around Trump falsified these records. It's a federal election crime. Did you know this issue was raised more than 5 or 6 years ago? The feds looked at this and said, there's no crime here. Didn't happen.
Exactly.
But Alvin Bragg said, I believe the feds got it wrong. They should have prosecuted Trump. Therefore, this falsification of business records, which, by the way, requires intent and knowledge, neither of which did Trump have, this falsification of business records, he is saying that it took place in order to commit a crime the feds said that Trump did not commit. That's crazy talk. I don't even know how to say it any more than that. So I heard this a couple of times. If this was not Trump, these charges would never have been brought. I heard that we've never seen this kind of case in U.S. history. We've never seen this kind of case under this New York statute ever used like this. You know who said that? That wasn't Trump's campaign. Those were CNN commentators. That was MSNBC saying this. Folks, when you've got the most liberal wing of the Democratic Party and these media outlets saying, I can't believe these charges were brought, that ought to raise your eyebrows. So at the end of the day, that's what happened. Trump was indicted for committing a crime that he didn't commit in order to commit another crime that everybody else, including the feds, already said he didn't commit. So he got convicted for committing crimes that he didn't commit. That makes it pretty simple, right?
And what's this crap that I keep hearing about where he has been accused of some crime that they are not talking about? Hasn't been disclosed yet. How the heck is that constitutional?
Yeah, so I don't know all the details of that, Shaun, but what happened in the trial in particular is the judge gave instructions to the jury and said it was really kind of odd. He, instead of saying you have to believe, if you're going to vote guilty, you got to believe beyond reasonable doubt that Trump committed falsification of business records and in order to influence federal election in all 34 counts. That's what the normal instructions would be. What the judge did in this case, as I understand it, is he said it doesn't have to be both. You only have to be convinced beyond reasonable doubt that he either falsified business records, that he either wanted to influence the election, or that either he did something that was illegal regarding his taxes. It wasn't even introduced in the trial. He said if you can find one of those three in each of the counts, then you can consider beyond reasonable doubt to convict him of that count. It was very, very odd. Now, there was one other thing that happened in this trial that I think speaks to the Shamviction profile that we've talked about. So to make matters even worse, Shaun, Michael Cohen is sitting on the witness stand, and Trump's defense team is asking him, do you like Trump? And he's like, no. Do you want to see him convicted? Absolutely. Well, why? Because I think he should pay for his crimes. Or do you hope to be a part of that? Yes, absolutely. Have you been working with the prosecution? No, not really. Well, it says here you've met with him like a dozen times. Well, yeah, that. Okay. Are you telling the truth? Oh, yeah, definitely. What's different this time? Well, because I'm telling you the truth. I mean, it just goes on and on. I mean, you could not ask for a worse witness by the prosecution. And yet, Trump was convicted 34 times, a total Shamviction. So, Shaun, let's transition for a second. What I really wanted to get to today a little bit was just to talk about the double standard. So there was some real shady stuff going on early or late spring, early summer 2016. You remember what that was?
Had something to do with some email?
Slightly. So may I indulge to do a quick recap?
Oh, dive in.
Hillary Clinton was running the Clinton crime family out of a server in her basement in New York under the guise of the Secretary of State. And what do I mean by that? She was using her influence as Secretary of State in order to solicit donors and other folks to help her with her election. When the Fed started to look into it, she hired a company called BleachBit, and they absolutely scrubbed her hard drive to the T.
Illegal.
Totally illegal, especially because she did it after a subpoena was issued in order to get those emails. But no. Why? We don't want to prosecute Hillary. That would be prosecuting a political opponent. No, that's actually not true. James Comey was the one who gave us the rationale of doing that. And he said, while what she did was wrong, no reasonable jury would convict. Do you remember those conversations?
Oh yeah. I remember his flim flam speech, thinking, oh, she is going to get it. And then
And in fact, it was done, everything that was about that was completely political. And for example, the FBI, that's not even their role. Their role is to go to the Attorney General, present the evidence, and then make a recommendation. And then the Attorney General is the one that says, yeah, we'll prosecute or not. Well, in this case, that individual was Loretta Lynch. She was the Attorney General. She happened to meet President Bill Clinton on an impromptu meeting on the tarmac of a government plane. And she stated, I will go with whatever the recommendation of the FBI is. And lo and behold, James Comey, a couple of days later, holds a press conference saying no reasonable jury would convict. We're not going to bring this. And Loretta Lynch said, I'm just going with the recommendation of the FBI. Totally, it's completely nefarious. I digress, but the double standard was astounding. There was overwhelming evidence that crimes were committed with intent, malice, and prejudice. But it didn't matter. So then we fast forward to just the last couple of years, Hunter Biden. I don't need to go into all of the things that Hunter Biden has done, mainly because we consider this show PG-13. And mostly what Hunter's involved in is NC-17 and worse. To say the last X, whatever you want to call it. But suffice it to say, Hunter Biden has been gallivanting around the world, collecting cash for daddy. But there's some things that you just can't deny. He had a gun charge that he couldn't get away from because he was a drug addict, and he falsely testified that he was no longer a drug addict. He got a firearm. He left it in a trash can. It was just a mess. The feds had to do something with it. And this came out probably a year ago, 6 months ago. I can't remember, but Biden was or Hunter Biden was doing a plea deal with the feds that was like the most sweetheart deal you've ever seen. It was like, if you promise to be nice in the future, and we know you didn't do it with intent, and we just want to help you recover, then we're going to consider your apology to be your punishment. That's basically what it said. Until the judge got a hold of it and said, what the hell is this? That's exactly what happened. And she put a stop to it. And then when she started saying, no, you're not going to do this because it's outside the bounds of the law, well, then Hunter Biden's team said, well, wait a second, then we're not accepting the plea deal if you're going to start adding stuff to it. Okay, so that's another example. Double standard number 3 is Joe Biden himself. Shaun, what was Mar-a-Lago rated? The feds raided Mar-a-Lago in polos, unmarked, full body gear, with orders to use deadly force if necessary. What was the reason that they did that?
Classified documents.
Absolutely. So where were these classified documents? They were on Trump's, I'm going to call it compound. They were in Mar-a-Lago, inside his residence. There's a gate to get in Mar-a-Lago, is there not?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. All right. And eventually they were put in a safe. I seem to recall Joe Biden having some classified documents. Do I remember that correctly?
You do remember that correctly. And to add to that, the Mar-a-Lago situation, those were classified documents under somebody who had the authority to declassify them because he was president. He never held any other office. And Joe Biden, when he had his classified documents, was not president of the United States, and therefore did not have the authority to declassify even one sentence on any of those documents.
Huge point, Shaun. He had no authority whatsoever. Holding classified documents is one thing, but Joe Biden gave those classified documents to a ghostwriter. Sharing them, to me, is upping the ante quite a bit.
Oh, yeah, because who's to say who the ghostwriter was? Is the ghostwriter fully vetted? We know that it's Biden, so it's not very likely that they did any more vetting than to see if maybe the ghostwriter has a web page.
The ghostwriter might have been President Xi out of China, for all we know.
Could very well have been.
So Biden was ultimately not prosecuted. And do you remember the reason that was given for not prosecuting? Because it was the same thing with Hillary. It was, yeah, this is wrong and this broke the law.
It was, well, he's an old man and he wouldn't be competent to stand trial because he's got a bad memory. Well, but he can be president of the United States.
Yeah, that's what's hilarious. I'll get to that in just a second. But what's hilarious is, in the words of Ben Shapiro, the report validated he's a doddering old fool who's well advanced in years and has significant cognitive memory problems. And in their words, no jury would be likely to convict because he comes across as a nice old man. He's guilty, but we probably won't win the case, so let's not try. Hillary, she's guilty, but we're likely not to win, so let's not try. Biden, he's guilty. Let's see if we can give a sweetheart deal and just slide it through. Trump, not guilty, but he's got to pay.
Right. And you have to keep in mind that Hillary on trial and Biden on trial, they would have Democrat everything in the courtroom. They've got Democrat press, they've got Democrat DA, they've got the whole Justice Department in their back pocket. ordering pizza for lunch, and they've got a string of judges, not only the one on the bench, but also probably in the dugout.
It's absolutely true. So what does all of this mean? I'm going to share just a little bit of my thoughts. I'm seeing a pattern where people in our country, whether citizens, whether jurors, whether elected officials, are making decisions that are completely in contradiction to the evidence presented. And I know I had a producer who warned me, do not bring OJ into this, but Shaun, I just have to throw it out there. I did have a couple of friends that asked me what I thought, and I said just a few short words: worse than OJ. And my point in that was, way back then, you had overwhelming evidence of the guilt of OJ Simpson, and a jury acquitted him because of the emotions around the case, of other perceived wrongs that happened preceding that. And I looked at this Trump case and I said, well, in many ways, it's very similar. You had overwhelming evidence also, but it was overwhelming evidence that Trump had not committed a crime. And the jury said, no, there's got to be something there. There's other crimes that he's got to pay for. But then
And a witness admitted to another crime, which was much more heinous than what Trump is on trial for.
absolutely. Then you start adding to the FBI is not going to investigate Hillary despite overwhelming evidence of a crime. So they did the opposite of what the evidence suggested. They did a sweetheart deal for Hunter Biden to keep it quiet, despite the overwhelming evidence of the corruption that's going on and the really what I would call is a sellout of our country. And you have Joe Biden, who clearly violated all sorts of issues with classified information, and not prosecuting him because we can't get a conviction. So in all of these cases, what you're seeing is elected officials, governing folks, but private citizens all making decisions that are the opposite of overwhelming evidence. Shaun, that's very concerning to me on a whole lot of levels.
Yeah, to say the least. I take it that that's a subtle nod to me to share my initial response. Yes. I didn't find out until a few hours after the fact because I was busy doing other stuff. But like I said, I was furniture throwing angry. I was ready to do a few things, and the fruit of the spirit is love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, self-control. So self-control had to just come out of the woodwork and to get me, because I could just feel the blood pressure starting to rise, and I don't have blood pressure issues. But anyway, I was, yeah, I was quite angry. Sean Foyt pulled me back from the edge. He had a posting on Facebook, which I read almost immediately. And he basically said they just handed Trump the victory. And I thought that's what I got to focus on, because I do believe that. These nuclear powered morons, and I know that's not nice, but I'm not trying to be nice. I'm tired of being nice. The Democrat Party, and the soapbox, I'm only going to get on the little coupon. The Democrat Party has just demonstrated to us that they are a cartel. They are the single biggest threat to the United States of America internally. It is a cartel. They will do whatever it takes, including break the law or invent things and commit lawfare against their own citizens in order to get their way. And then if they don't get their way, they threaten to burn the place down. Okay. Yeah, that was my initial response. So
Well, I can tell that you don't
it's
feel
split.
strongly about it.
Yeah, it's split. Uh yes, I do agree they just gave Trump the victory. But what the angry part is, because yesterday's conviction demonstrates the amount of decay that our country has experienced for us to get to this kind of wicked verdict.
Yeah, I would say it's pretty bad, and I totally agree with you. I think the Democrats are in for a rude awakening. I believe they just handed Trump the victory as well. And here's some evidence of that, in my opinion. So the when was the verdict handed out yesterday? It's 4:30, 5 p.m., something like that.
Yeah, something 4:30, quarter till.
From that time till midnight, Trump raised $35 million for his campaign.
Oh, wow. I didn't know that. I knew he had raised some, but wow.
30, I think it
That's
was
a short period
34.5
of
or
time.
31.5, something like that. It was so overwhelming, it crashed the servers. Could have even been more. They had to scramble.
Yeah,
It-
I was listening to a podcast where they said, "Oh, it's up now. Oh, now it's back down. Oh, it's up now. Now it's back down." So, and that was why. That had to be why then.
Overwhelming number of people. I think the other thing that kind of comes to my mind, there's two things. One is more maybe of the analysis, and the other is just what we see in scripture. The analysis is this to me truly is an example that the ends justify all means. I do believe that the modern day liberal who doesn't follow traditional biblical Judeo-Christian values really operates from that mindset. We've done a podcast on that, and I feel as strongly about it today as I did then, and that is the ends justify all means. Well, the ends that they see is that Trump is wicked, he cannot be allowed into office. So there is no level of illegal activity that can be embarked upon as long as the ends are to stop Trump. And I just see that. I see it, and it's not just Trump. You see that everywhere. You see that in legislation. You actually not in legislation so much because that's really more the legal means. What you see it is how the courts issue rulings that are actually establishing law, the pervasive use of executive actions. You just see it. And it's like, well, if I can't get it through legitimate means, then I'm just going to not even ask for forgiveness. I'm just going to do it and wait till somebody sues me and takes me to court. And by then it's too late anyway. That's really the approach that the modern day progressive liberal takes. It's the ends justify all means. The problem is someday the person who thinks that way is going to be another Hitler. It's going to be the Antichrist. It's going to be somebody like that. And what you think is great now because you're willing to bend and break and subvert the law to achieve what you think is a higher ends will turn out to absolutely destroy you in the long term.
Oh yeah, the folks that are screaming the word fascist the most often are themselves practicing fascism.
Exactly. I mean, you talk about calling the kettle black. The other thing that comes to my mind is that there is wickedness here, Shaun, and you know, I'm not going to call. I'm not going to reach. I'm not going to go to the level and say all Democrats are wicked. What I am going to say is the platform of the party is, and how they approach is. I think there are good people in the Democratic Party, but apparently they just haven't seen the wisdom or the light to get out. But I digress. I think Scripture tells us that. I don't think Scripture tells us that there is a day of reckoning for the wicked in this life or the next. And I think as Christians, sometimes we get very frustrated because it often feels like we don't see justice in the here and the now, but there is hope that justice will be served. And President Bush said something after 9/11 one time that always struck me. Doesn't mean I agree with all his policies, but he did say something that was really resolute when he was talking about the terrorists. He said, whether we bring the terrorists to justice or whether we bring justice to the terrorists, either way, justice will be served. And that was a powerful statement to me. And I think we can find comfort that as we want to see justice served, not because we want to see people sentenced to eternal damnation. That's not the case. But we do want to see goodness and holiness prevail. I think where we could take that statement and we can say whether the Lord brings justice now or whether the Lord poses injustice in the future, either way, justice will be served. Shaun, closing thoughts?
I totally agree with everything that you just said, and I would say very well said. What a lot of people do not understand, because it's very rarely ever talked about. I can't remember anybody that's actually talked about it, but surely I'm not the first one to verbalize it. Spiritually speaking, when you agree with a platform, a platform that has influence over leadership, over how a country or a town or a state is governed. And any part of that is wicked. And we see it with this particular party. They are for things that God says are wicked, are bad, are sin, are an abomination. And one by one, this particular party has embraced what the Lord has told us is sin. When you vote for the folks that are supporting that platform, you are in agreement with darkness. The more darkness that they embrace, the more influential the darkness becomes. There is a point in which there are a point or a line that you can cross into darkness where you become its slave. You enter into bondage, and it's probably not very far from there that you enter the reprobate mind. Then you're really screwed.
I agree, Shaun. You become, I'm not quite as eloquent as you, but you become like who and what you hang around and who and what you embrace. You embrace darkness, you'll be swallowed by it eventually.
And that darkness, it blinds you. And you're now in a position where scripture told us this was going to happen. We are living in that season where good is called evil and evil is called good.
Yep, I
We're
believe in
living in a
yeah.
society where people have unintentionally embraced it, and now everything in their life is upside down.
Shaun, as we close today, I guess there was a couple other things that I also forgot to mention that I would like to throw out there about what I think is coming and what this means. I don't know if you caught wind that the sentencing of Trump is supposed to occur just a couple days before the Republican National Convention, and
I
many
did catch
believe
that.
that this particular judge who's got an axe to grind is going to sentence Trump to jail so that he can't even participate in the Republican National Convention. Good luck with that, is what I guess I'm going to say. The other thing that I think is going to happen that we haven't really talked about, this is going to be appealed. There's no doubt, and it'll be overturned. There is no doubt. I believe both of those. It's going to take time. I don't know. I know Trump is talking about getting an emergency appeal to the Supreme Court because, of course, we've never seen anything like this when a political opponent in the middle and the height of a presidential election is being persecuted to this degree, prosecuted, attacked like this. So I fully expect that whatever, if the appeal goes to the circuit courts or the appeal goes to the Supreme Court, that it'll be taken up fairly quickly, likely overturned, and then we'll be talking about how the Democrats will forget the overturning of the conviction and we'll only be talking about the original conviction, and then we can have a whole podcast on that. That's kind of where I see this going.
Yeah, well, if that judge sentences him to jail, he is fighting with fire. I would urge him, you better not do that.
All I can say is stay in New York. I don't want you anywhere else, dude. Well, that's all the time we have for today. Shaun, thanks for sharing some of your non-emotional opinions regarding this particular case. We definitely, I know a lot of people are talking about it, but I think here on the grid, we always have a good perspective of kind of what's going on in the physical, but also really just our thoughts spiritually about how this is all playing out. And folks, we need to pursue righteousness, and we need to call out where that's not happening. And I think we're seeing that front and center here today. Thanks for joining us today here on the grid. Shaun, last thoughts?
Yes. The first thing we need to do, and as we close this, we need to forgive the Democrats.
You're right.
We need to forgive them. That puts us on a righteous level to be able to hear the Lord for the next part of the strategy.
Yeah, our fury has to be a righteous indignation at the sin, not the individual. These are lost people, folks. A lot of lost people making a lot of lost decisions. Thanks for joining us on the grid.
Take
Till
care.
next time.